Jennifer Carter was 36 years old, and at first glance her life seemed picture perfect. She lived in a spacious house on the outskirts of Boston, with a manicured garden and a routine shaped by the demands of a brilliant husband, Dr. William Carter, chief of cardiac surgery at one of the city's most prestigious hospitals. For years, Jennifer had put aside her own career as a professor to support William's path, convinced that shared sacrifice was the foundation of a solid marriage. On everyone's eyes, she was the exemplary wife, the devoted mother of 3 children, and the impeccable hostess at every gala dinner hosted by the hospital. However, beneath the surface of that enviable picture, a silent emptiness was beginning to grow, a feeling that something wasn't right, even if she didn't yet know what it was. The day that lit the fuse was unremarkable. It was a cold autumn Saturday, with leaves piled up in the driveway and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee in the kitchen. William had left early with the excuse of running in the park, and upon returning, he dropped his gym bag on the couch before disappearing into the shower. Jennifer, who had never been in the habit of going through her things, was drawn by a strange, almost instinctive impulse. When she opened the bag, she found a white shirt with a red lipstick mark on the collar, a deep red that contrasted with the sweet perfume impregnated in the fabric, a scent that wasn't hers. It was as if the air suddenly became heavier. That small, out-of-place detail began to crack the facade of the perfect life she had defended for more than a decade. Jennifer wasn't naive. She knew a simple trace of lipstick wasn't definitive proof, but the unease that settled in her chest prompted her to search for more. That same afternoon, while William was napping on the couch, she discreetly picked up his cell phone. Her hands were shaking so much she could barely scroll. What she discovered was devastating. Dozens of messages between William and Dr. Rebecca Harrington, his colleague at the hospital. They were explicit, lustful messages, with references to hotel trysts, secret rendezvous between surgeries, and promises of a future together. Each word was like a stab that shattered the image of the man to whom she had given 15 years of her life. When she confronted him, she expected at least a hint of guilt, an explanation, a crack in that mask of coldness. But William showed not the slightest remorse. Sitting at the dining room table, arms crossed and brow furrowed, he launched into the words as if giving a clinical diagnosis. He wanted a divorce. He said Jennifer had been a good domestic wife, but that she had held back his aspirations, that she never understood the magnitude of his career, that it tied him to a life he no longer wanted. The woman was paralyzed, listening to how years of sacrifice were reduced to an obstacle, how the love she had believed to be mutual was discarded with surgical coldness. In that instant, she understood that the betrayal was not a passing mistake, but the beginning of the total collapse of her world. That night, while the house felt like an empty museum, the dishwasher whirring like a tired fan, and the refrigerator light turning on every time she opened it, not hungry, Jennifer sat in front of the family laptop with a calm that didn't belong to her. They had joint accounts and routinely saved logins. It took a couple of attempts to download the statements for the past 5 years. She printed everything page by page until the living room smelled of warm toner and new paper. She highlighted each unidentified withdrawal with a yellow highlighter and the recurring payments she couldn't remember approving in red. At 3:12 in the morning, with the microwave beeping at the end of a cup of water she never turned into tea, a pattern emerged. Monthly transfers of between $5,000 and $10,000 to an entity called Riverside Holdings, LLC. The name seemed invented to hide in the undergrowth of the generic. Jennifer didn't cry. He stacked the sheets in a blue folder with a handwritten label, "Questions that deserve answers." The next morning, her eyes burning from insomnia and mascara she hadn't quite removed, she arrived at the office of a lawyer recommended by a friend, Nora Kaplan, a woman with a soft voice and a sharp mind who collected antique fountain pens on her desk. Nora listened silently, took minimal notes, and then asked her permission to review the statements. "First, you have to protect yourself. Second, freeze what can be frozen," she said, in a tone that turned chaos into a plan. Together they looked up Riverside Holdings in the State Business Registry. The LLC existed, yes, with a single member, William Carter. They added up the figures with a precision that only well-directed anger can produce. Around $250,000 had flowed there in recent years, raindrops that, soundlessly, had formed a flood. Jennifer felt the floor tilt. Infidelity was no longer a foreign body that could be expelled. It was a parallel circulatory system, a secret financial life where she did not exist. With each document reviewed, Jennifer understood that the betrayal wasn't limited to a romantic slip. It was a calculated demolition of everything they had built together. She remembered the times he asked for her patience because the hospital bills were unpredictable, or when he assured her that he was investing in the children's future. It had all been a perfectly rehearsed script to distract her. As Nora organized a folder with possible legal moves, Jennifer felt a strange mix of helplessness and lucidity, as if she were suddenly seeing clearly a picture she had observed closely for years but had never understood. What had collapsed was not just trust, but the security of a home she believed she shared. Days later, as if fate had wanted to deepen the wound, Jennifer received an unexpected call from Nathan Brooks, a former colleague of William's whom she had lost track of long ago. They met at a discreet cafe, a place with worn wooden tables and the lingering scent of cinnamon. Nathan, his face marked by dark circles and the air of a man carrying heavy secrets, confessed the unthinkable. During the in vitro fertilization treatments Jennifer and William underwent to conceive their 3 children, her husband had manipulated the procedures. William suffered from a hereditary heart condition, and to prevent this information from coming to light, he had ordered his own genetic material replaced with that of anonymous donors, without ever informing her. Jennifer listened in disbelief, feeling her blood pounding in her ears. What Nathan was revealing to her wasn't just a betrayal of a partner, it was a silent theft of the most intimate truth, the origin of her children. Jennifer left that cafe with numb legs, as if the floor had turned to jelly beneath her feet. Nathan's confession gave new weight to every memory of her pregnancies, every ultrasound hanging on the refrigerator, every birthday party where William smiled for a photo like a proud father. That same week, she secretly took her 3 children for DNA testing. The envelope with the results arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, when the postman dropped the letter through the mailbox with the indifference of someone delivering advertising. Jennifer opened the envelope in the kitchen, her hands shaking, and there it was, 0% biological compatibility with William. She felt the air escape from her lungs. It wasn't just the marital deception or the missing money. Her husband had manipulated the core of their family since before it existed. That night she didn't sleep. She sat at the dining room table dimly lit by the pendant lamp, mentally replaying every gesture, every word, every lie disguised as truth. In a flash of lucidity, she realized that William hadn't acted alone. To sustain such a deception, he needed accomplices. It was then that she remembered Diane Fletcher, a nurse from the fertility lab who had always seemed uncomfortably evasive. With the support of Nora, her lawyer, and after several attempts to contact her, she managed to meet with Diane in a half-empty parking lot. There, amidst the shadows and the smell of gasoline, the woman confessed what she knew. Altered files, falsified forms, consent forms signed in her name without her ever having seen them. Diane was willing to talk, and with her, a door opened to a network much larger than Jennifer had imagined. With Diane's help, Jennifer began to piece together a macabre puzzle. The nurse handed her copies of internal records, swapped samples, altered patient codes, and documents where Jennifer's signature was copied with suspicious perfection. Each page was a testament to William's abuse of power, not only over her, but over dozens of families who had trusted the clinic. It was at that point that Nora, the lawyer, contacted a federal agent specializing in medical fraud, Michael Dawson. He entered Jennifer's life with the sobriety of someone who has seen too many lives shattered by similar deceptions. Dawson listened to everything without interrupting, taking notes in a black notebook, and at the end calmly said, "What we have here is not a domestic case. It's a web of corruption." The following days became a routine of clandestinity. Jennifer and Diane met in discreet cafes, always changing locations, gradually handing over the documents that incriminated William. Dawson oversaw everything, building a solid dossier with dates, evidence, and testimonies. As the file grew, so did the weight on Jennifer's chest. She had gone from being a betrayed wife to a key player in the exposure of a medical fraud of unimaginable proportions. And although fear accompanied her every night, she also felt that, for the first time in a long time, she had a purpose of her own. The rage that once consumed her transformed into determination. She sought justice not only for herself, but also for every family who had been deceived in the same way. Amid this storm of discoveries, an unexpected twist added another layer of complexity. One afternoon, while organizing the evidence collected in his office, Dawson showed Jennifer a document directly linking Rebecca Harrington, William's mistress, to a case of medical malpractice that had occurred years earlier. Rebecca wasn't just an ambitious colleague. She was the daughter of a patient who had died during a surgery William had presided over under murky circumstances. Records indicated that he had operated exhausted after spending a weekend with Rebecca, then barely a young adult. The death was covered up with manipulated reports and a hush-hush financial settlement. Suddenly, everything took on a macabre meaning. The relationship between William and Rebecca wasn't just an affair, but part of a carefully planned revenge game she had planned. For Jennifer, the revelation was a double blow. On the one hand, she felt a strange empathy for Rebecca. Both had been used by the same man, albeit in different ways. On the other, she understood that their relationship had been poisoned from the start, a cycle of pain disguised as passion. During her sleepless nights, she replayed images of Rebecca smiling next to William at hospital events, and couldn't help but think about the cruelty of the parallel. Wife and lover, both cogs in a machine manipulated by the same surgeon who, scalpel in hand, played with lives inside and outside the operating room. That realization didn't erase the hatred or resentment, but it planted a certainty. What was about to collapse wasn't just a marriage. It was an entire empire of lies that had contaminated even those around him. The opportunity to expose him came faster than Jennifer imagined. The hospital was hosting its annual gala, a black tie event honoring outstanding doctors. William would receive the Doctor of the Year award for his supposed ethics and commitment to patients. Jennifer silently saw the ceremony as the perfect setting to expose the truth. With Dawson's guidance, the hospital board had already received the full dossier: evidence of fraud at the fertility clinic, illegal money transfers, and testimonies from affected families. The gala became a precursor to justice, although most of those present didn't yet suspect it. Jennifer chose a sober black dress not to impress, but to make a statement at the moment when her world and William's would shatter in front of everyone. The night was fraught with tension, although on the surface celebration reigned. William took the stage with his usual confidence, speaking of integrity, trust, and the nobility of the medical profession. Jennifer watched from her table, her heart pounding like a drum, knowing that each word was a hollow echo about to collapse. No one else noticed, but at the side of the room, federal agents discreetly waited for Dawson's signal. When the ceremony ended, William received a standing ovation. What he didn't know was that the ovation would be the last applause of his career. That same night, in the restaurant where they were celebrating, the same one where he had proposed to her years before, Jennifer confronted him with an envelope. The DNA tests confirming that none of the 3 children were biologically his. In front of Rebecca, in front of everyone, William's face cracked for the first time. William tried to maintain his composure, but his voice trembled when he asked where she had gotten those results. Jennifer didn't respond with words. She placed the rest of the folder on the table, with copies of transfers, Diane's testimonies, and manipulated reports. Rebecca, who until that moment had been defiant, fell silent when she recognized the documents that confirmed what she had long suspected, that she had also been used in the surgeon's sick game. The scene became unbearable, with the murmurs of the diners and the distant sound of cutlery clinking at other tables. It was then that the federal agents entered and, without raising their voices, approached William to inform him that he was under arrest. The image of the successful doctor collapsed in a matter of seconds, and what until that night had been seen as an untouchable man was reduced to a defendant handcuffed in front of his own family. The days that followed were an avalanche of headlines. Scandal in Boston medicine, fraud at fertility clinic, the fall of an exemplary doctor. Jennifer suddenly found herself in the middle of a media storm, but this time not as a silent victim, but as the woman who had uncovered the truth. The hospital immediately suspended William. The fertility clinic was shut down, and dozens of families began coming forward, demanding explanations about their own treatments. Jennifer, exhausted but resolute, agreed to join a medical ethics committee to collaborate on the investigation and create protocols to prevent something like this from happening again. It was strange. The same environment in which she had felt invisible for years now recognized her as a valuable voice. And although the emotional scars remained raw, for the first time she felt she could breathe without the shadow of the man who had controlled every aspect of her life. Amidst that chaos, something emerged that Jennifer could never have anticipated. A kind of silent alliance with Rebecca. After the public humiliation, the young woman approached her, her eyes red and her expression broken, confessing that her relationship with William had been born out of a desire for revenge, but that he had caught her in the same web of manipulation. They weren't seeking friendship or forgiveness, but there was a mutual recognition that they had both been victims of a man who built his power on lies. Jennifer agreed to listen, not out of compassion, but because she understood that part of healing was acknowledging that the other woman had also carried an unbearable truth. These conversations echoed one theme. William had played with their lives as if they were interchangeable pieces on a chessboard, and neither deserved to be trapped in his corrupt legacy. Over time, the investigation progressed, and William's hidden assets were confiscated. Despite all the pain, this measure guaranteed the stability of Jennifer's 3 children, who were still too young to fully grasp the magnitude of what had happened. She began to rebuild her life away from the noise of the hospital, but with a new purpose: to dedicate herself to supporting other families in situations of medical trust breach. She joined forums, participated in talks, and wrote articles where she recounted not only her experience, but also the importance of demanding transparency in a system that so often operates in the shadows. The woman who had spent years reduced to the title of Williams' wife now became a heard and respected voice, and although she still had nights when the past visited her like a nightmare, one thing was undeniable: she was free to write her own story without asking permission. As the months passed, Jennifer began to notice a change in herself. The woman who once woke up measuring her worth based on William's needs was now learning to sustain herself by her own accomplishments. She returned to her vocation as a teacher, this time leading literature workshops at a small community college. She discovered that her voice, one that had been silenced for years, could inspire other women to reclaim lost ground. Each class became a reminder that there was much more within her than the role of the perfect wife. Her students described her as a passionate teacher, capable of making a paragraph seem like an entire universe. That renewed energy was living proof that even from ruins, something powerful can be born. The final closure came at a public hearing where William was sentenced. Jennifer attended, not out of obligation, but because she needed to face the end of that chapter head-on. She saw him enter handcuffed, wearing the same suit he had worn years before to hospital ceremonies, but this time worn and lackluster. Nothing remained of the idolized doctor, only an ordinary man facing the consequences of his own arrogance. When the judge handed down the sentence, Jennifer didn't applaud or smile. She just took a deep breath, like someone dropping a burden they'd been carrying for too long. As she left the courtroom, the cold city breeze hit her face, and for the first time in years, she felt no fear, no anger, no pain. She felt peace. It was the closure she had hoped for, the one that allowed her to look forward with the certainty that, although she would never forget what she had experienced, she had finally gotten her life back.